One more moment. Okay. Kyle, you may begin whenever you're ready.
All right, thank you, Jesus, and welcome everybody to the April 19th, 2023 meeting of the CB6 Executive Committee. My name is Kyle Tide, and I am the chair of CB6. This meeting—
Kyle, you may begin whenever you're ready.
Oh, sorry. Did you not hear me?
I heard you.
Okay,
I heard you.
sorry. I'll restart. We'll restart it.
I'm sorry about that. There was some feedback in the background.
No problem. All right. Welcome, everybody, to the April 19th, 2023 meeting of the CB6 Executive Committee. My name is Kyle Tide, and I'm the chair of CB6. This meeting is called to order at 6:32 p.m., and tonight we are joined by District Manager Jesus Perez. As a reminder to everyone, New York State law now requires all community board members to have their cameras on and their first and last names displayed from the time the meeting is called to order until the time the meeting is adjourned. If your camera is not on and your name not properly displayed, you cannot count towards quorum. Tonight's minutes will be taken by CB6 Assistant Secretary Maura Wong. We will now take attendance by roll call, and Jesus will conduct the roll call. Please answer present when your name is called.
All right, everyone. As Kyle mentioned, please answer present because I can't see you right now on the setup that I have. Kyle Athayed.
Present.
Thank you. Neil Barkley.
Present.
Thank you. Elvie Barroso.
Present.
Thank you. Claire Brennan. Claire Brennan. Okay, we'll move on. B. Disman.
Present.
Thank you. Adam Hartke.
Present.
Thank you. John Keller.
President.
Thank you. Sandra McKee. Sandra McKee. Okay, I'm not hearing anything. We'll move on. Rich Mintz.
Present.
Thank you. Steve O.
Present.
Thank you. Reshma Patel.
Present.
Thank you. Matt Roberts.
Present.
Thank you. Sandro Sherrod. Sandro Sherrod. All right, I'm not hearing anything. We'll move on. Mark Thompson.
Present.
Thank you. Brian Van Nieuwenhoven.
Brian is here, but I think he's having some tech issue, audio issue.
Okay. We'll mark Brian present. Maura Wong.
Present.
Thank you. With 13 out of 16 members present, we do have quorum.
All right, thank you very much, Jesus. So the agenda for tonight's meeting appears on the screen before you. If there is no objection, we will adopt the agenda as stated. So members of the Executive Committee, if you object to adopting the agenda, please raise your hand through Zoom. Seeing no objections, the agenda for tonight's meeting is adopted. The minutes from the March 15th meeting were distributed to Executive Committee members ahead of time by the board office. If there is no objection, we will adopt these minutes as drafted. So committee members, if you object to adopting the minutes, please raise your hand through Zoom. All right, seeing no objections, the minutes from the March 15th meeting are adopted. We also have the minutes from the March 1st Bylaws Committee meeting, which were distributed to Executive Committee members ahead of time by the board office. If there is no objection, we will adopt these minutes as drafted. Committee members, if you object to adopting the minutes, please raise your hand through Zoom. All right, seeing no objections, the minutes from the March 1st Bylaws Committee meeting are adopted. All right, as we conduct an efficient meeting tonight, let's observe a few ground rules. First, no one may speak until granted the floor. 2, committee members, if you have a question about committee business or wish to make a motion, please first raise your hand through Zoom. As a reminder, the chat function should not be used for committee business or questions about agenda topics. All such remarks should be made on the record by raising your hand through Zoom. Chat should only be used to alert us to any technical difficulties you are having or to state in writing information, such as an email address or link that was already stated aloud on the record during the meeting. And again, when a committee member is given the floor to speak, I will first identify you and then you can unmute yourself so you can speak. All right, so I'll now deliver my chair's report, very brief, just two things. So the first thing is I will remind this committee what I shared actually at full board last week about the new bylaws. There are two very important things that all of you should be aware of as committee chairs. The first thing is attendance. Any member of your committee that informs you of an absence ahead of time needs to be excused or not excused by you. But you need to inform the board office of your decision on that matter based on what has been shared with you. So that's the first thing. The second thing is about resolutions. Any resolution that you want to work on at a committee meeting should first be shared with your committee at least 3 days in advance of that meeting. Now, I know for some committees that the timing sometimes is a little weird. And so, of course, on a case-by-case basis, we'll work on those particular issues. But that's obviously most important for our full board meetings when we want to share those resolutions out. So those are the two main things that really affect your leadership on each of your committees. So I just want to make sure that everybody is aware of that. If anybody has any questions about that, feel free to reach out to me about it. The second thing, as it relates to the bylaws, is about attendance. The bylaws require us to, of course, take attendance at every one of our committee meetings as well as full board. And for those with that attendance, gives us the ability to remove those individuals based on poor attendance. One of the things I want to bring to this committee is that there are several members of the board who have qualified for this particular bylaw and have been informed of their attendance and have not received either replies to that or legitimate reasons as to why they have not shown up. Now, the question before the committee is, do we want to exercise what the bylaws tells us to, which is that basically a vote on whether or not they should be on the board would be taken by our executive committee and then to the full board where they will be voted on as well. This is what is required of us by the bylaws, but if it's not, then that's something that we need to think about for future revisions of it. So I just want to throw that out there, and if anyone has any thoughts on that going forth. Brian, yeah, go ahead.
What does it exactly say in the bylaws in terms of like what the process is for?
So if an individual misses at least 3 consecutive meetings, whether it's on the committee level, full board, or even executive committee, the board can remove them from the board for failing to meet their duties as a board member. The process is what I just outlined before, which is that we would have to discuss it at executive committee and then take a vote on it, and then also do that at full board as well. As you can imagine, this would be an awkward process, but it is what is stated in our bylaws and is, something that we hold our members accountable to, is to show up if you're on the board. So there are several members who do not meet that threshold, who are meeting the threshold of being removed from the board. And it's, up for discussion how we want to proceed on that. Yeah, Elvie?
Yeah, I have one member that falls into that category, but I just feel it would be embarrassing if it's done during the full board meeting.
Yeah, I mean, in some of these cases, for some of the individuals, they have still yet to reply to inquiries about it. Obviously we have to be understanding of, why someone may be absent or not. But in some cases we have received no response at all. There have been some members who have missed a whole year of committee meetings without any documentation or notification to the board. And so either we proceed with a member who never shows up to their meetings, or we remove them and have someone appointed who will show up. So I'll turn it to B, since he was the chair of the bylaws committee.
Yeah, so this issue came up for a lot of discussion at the bylaws, because as you will notice periodically, and I had it even with the bylaws committee, we had to cancel meetings because we didn't have a quorum. So it really does inhibit us to do the business of the board. And this actually was just a simple modification of what's always been the bylaws of the community board. I have to say, since I've been on the board, I've seen it used a couple of times. But I think, Carl, the important thing is when you put someone on notice, there really needs to be a discussion. So I want to go to LB. I mean, if you're having a discussion, if there's a good reason for it, if there's illness or stuff, I mean, those are the things that you could take into account. But it has always been the procedure that it's the executive committee and then the board. But I have to tell you, in order to be efficient, members have to show up.
Agreed.
Yes. I agree.
Yeah. Adam?
Thanks, Kyle. So what would the mechanics be? So let's say we take it to the logical conclusion within our powers. I mean, what then happens, I guess, with the borough president? Is there an ability, like, could the borough president reappoint this person? Like, how does that factor into whatever decision is made, if it comes to that?
Yeah. So the guidance that we receive from the borough president's office, because as you know, they are paying very close attention to people's attendance on boards throughout the borough. And so this is one of the topics that came up in our regular check-in with them as well. So they have always maintained the position that they will respect the bylaws of any given board and the processes that it takes. And if we remove somebody, they're not inclined to reappoint them because they're very much on the same level as well, which is, because they respect each board's autonomy. That they don't want to come in and say, okay, because you have, this attendance here, which may be a different standard than someone else's, to kind of come and remove people. They want the boards to kind of self-govern in that way. But yeah, they would respect the decision of the board because it is written into our bylaws that was voted on by board members. And as B mentioned, this actually has been the rule for quite some time. And I know to maintain proper decorum that we have, sometimes turned a blind eye to certain things, but because we just reestablished that is definitely a standard that we want to hold ourselves accountable to, that we either give it teeth or we don't. But wanted to bring it up since there are several people who fall in that category. Sandy?
I just wanted to say that I've been on the board for 12 years and I've never been party to a vote on this. And I think previously when it's happened, there was a discussion and the person was highly encouraged to leave and they did. So I don't know, maybe others who are, Sandra and Mark, did it ever come up when you were chair?
Yeah, Sandra, since your hand is up anyway.
Yeah. I was just going to add, so this actually came up multiple times, and because we didn't have a clearly defined path for expulsion, the borough president's council at the time had thought that there wasn't a real process, and therefore they could not actively encourage someone to leave because of non-attendance. So that the formalization of the process in the bylaws actually allows us to act, and by kind of by association allows the borough president to act when it's appropriate as well. So I think we're actually allowing the process to have formulation of form, and now we could or could not pursue it as needed.
Yeah, and Sandy, to that point, there were some people who had that issue last year as well. And when we talked to them, we're like, actually, I don't have time to do this anymore and I'm going to step down. This is more so for the people who aren't responding to anything and also not showing up. because then, there is no discussion at that point. It's just a one-way thing. So I don't even know if there's a legitimate reason why, or there isn't, or anything like that as well. But the fact that remains that there are people not showing up to make quorum. There are people who want to be on this board, who could be productive on this board, who are not getting the chance. And Mark, I don't know if you want to follow up to what Sandy's was saying before.
Yeah, just we did actually have a vote. I forgot how many years ago it was. It was a long time ago, where we're going to vote somebody off the board and a full board vote, and it became very unpleasant, very awkward, embarrassing. Person did not get voted off after a rather interesting session. But previous to that, like Sunderland, what we all do, and Sandy, you mentioned too, is that it's just trying to get those people. And there were a few people I had a hard time getting in touch with, but it was just calling him and saying, hey, one person didn't even know he was on the board, and he shouldn't have been on the board because of his position. It took a little bit of pushing, but everyone basically said, yeah, I don't need to be on the board, or I'll go public. It's fine. I don't have time. I think it's being gentle at first is what you have to do. And, last resort is actually doing exactly and doing a vote for the board.
Okay. B.
So I think the dialogue, as Sandy said, the notification and the dialogue is what's significant. And I think anyone who realizes that they haven't been meeting for half a year or a year understands that you're not contributing to the board. And that's a way of doing it in a non-embarrassed way, depending that if they don't have a major health issue or something of that nature, which you could excuse. But I guess, Kyle, what bothers me more is the non-response of the people, because in essence, you are doing a notification. I don't know if we're sending it by email or whatever, but I would actually say if you don't hear once, I would try again. But I think if they don't respond, they're telling us something. And I think that's the question of how we then deal with it. So when did these notifications go to them?
Some of them have been a couple of months. Some of them, it's been at least a couple of months for some of them. And then, as we mentioned before, there's some people who have not shown up for a year to certain things. So,
yeah. So do we have formal, we have the actual documentation that we notify them on X date? I would do a follow-up notification. And then bring it back I would recommend bringing it back to the executive committee and be more explicit on what we're dealing with.
Okay, sounds good. And then John?
Yeah, a lot of what I wanted to say has been said, so I won't repeat it, but I was through this process one. I don't know what the equivalent of a certified letter is in email, but if there's some way just to escalate in some way the notification, I think is a good point. But B's point is well made, that if someone doesn't respond, that is a response. But we need some proof that we actually did try to communicate with them. I was through this on the Community Education Council, and it is, to LB's original point, really awkward and really embarrassing. But we got in touch with the person over and over, and finally we had to go into executive committee, behind a closed door, and then come out and vote in public to remove them. And there's no nice way about it. You either have a bylaw that has a purpose or you don't.
Yeah. No, and that's my thinking, and that's why I wanted to mention it to the executive committee so that this wouldn't come out of left field. That this is definitely something that's very important to the functioning of the board, and this is a avenue that was just recently revoted into the bylaws in a more explicit way. So I just wanted to bring it up so that no one's surprised if it escalates to that point. And of course, Jesus and myself are reaching out constantly especially to the non-respondents, and I've reached out to other board members who are very close with them as well, to see if we can get some understanding of their situation. So, so I'll keep everybody posted as we're posted. Okay. And then with that, I'll turn it over to Jesus for the district manager's report.
I'm going to waive my report for tonight because I imagine we're going to have a lot of discussion throughout the meeting. But I guess I'd have one follow-up question. So the folks who have been notified, so then at this point, additional notifications are going out just to sort of try again?
Yeah, I think so. I think, yeah, we can do a couple more just to cover our bases.
Okay.
And yeah, if we don't hear before the next executive committee, we can share that at that point. Yeah, and of course, we'll be as respectful and confidential as we can in this forum.
Yeah, Kyle, could we do the thing that was suggested, let it by certified mail? So we have a receipt that someone signed for it.
Sure. Is that possible, Jesus?
I mean, we'll type the letter out, we'll put it on letterhead. We have a post office down the block, so I'll go down.
Yeah,
there.
but with certified, then we can, know that they received it themselves.
Yeah, we can do that. Now, I guess, so the notifications that have been going out, because this process, it isn't actually written in the bylaws. The bylaws say what counts as cause for removal. It doesn't actually say this is how you get notified and this is when and this is how we follow up. None of that is in the bylaws. Looking through old files, it looks like years and years ago, you guys would send out, or the office would send out a formal letter saying, per this section of the bylaws, you have, met the threshold for removal for cause, what say you type of stuff. What Kyle sent out was more sort of like, hey, you've missed X many days, we're concerned, are you all right? Do you still have time for this? And as he said, some folks took that as and said, oh, you know what, you're right, I'm gonna go. Others just haven't responded. So does this committee have any kind of preference as to moving forward? It's going to be like a formal letter on letterhead, even by email, or that's only for the certified step, or,
I think, yeah, if we're sending a certified letter out, that it should be stronger language, that we should say you have met the threshold for removal from the board due to, absences, and we can put that individual's record of their absences in that letter. And then we can send a more formal email that accompanies that to say a letter went out, because I don't even know if these individuals are at home to receive the letter, or if they're, God knows where, because they're dealing with, I don't know. So we can do both, but I think that's a good next step, is to send something more formal, because I've been trying to deal with it in a gentle, respectful way, especially for some of the longer term members who are dealing with this issue. But yeah, we can definitely use some stronger language there. Sandra?
Yeah, I was just going to basically kind of reaffirm what you said. I think that, if they miss one or two meetings, the informal email is appropriate, a phone call is appropriate. But if they're missing like 6 months worth of meetings, I think a strongly worded, serious certified letter is appropriate as well to send that message directly to them.
Got it. And Steve?
Sorry, two questions. Did I hear right that this was going to be discussed in a full board capacity or executive meeting?
So it has to go through both, because it'll have to be through a resolution. So it would be a resolution that comes out of this committee, executive committee, that then gets voted on at full board if it makes it there, for additional discussion. But the hope is that the individuals affected would not let it go that far for everybody's sake. But that would be the process if someone wanted to, fight it all the way through.
And my second, I guess, point is, if the committee recognizes the challenges to retain board members, as someone who's only served one term, there's a lot of learning curve involved here. So there are some challenges just trying to get to the motions of it. So once you have a senior or more veteran board member, it's certainly harder to train and keep that talent. So just to be aware, just retaining the talent versus and getting new board members are equally as challenging. So I think it makes sense to make every effort to give notifications, communications that it's been recognized.
Yeah, no, definitely. Because again, we don't know what's going on in people's lives, but I think, that kind of is a moot point if someone's not showing up, like they're not sharing any of their institutional knowledge or expertise or anything like that, if they're just not at the meeting at all. So that's really the concern at the end of the day, is like, we want that to be shared with the rest of the board. So yeah, noted for sure. And Maura?
Yeah, so I'm just asking about the letters and whether or not they should include some kind of language giving people the option to resign on their own. So it doesn't necessarily get to the vote, but actually spell that out for them ahead of time.
Yeah, we'll definitely include that as an option. Yeah, I think with this letter, it's we don't need to take the gentle beating around the bush approach, informal approach to it. I think we can be very explicit about what the options are for the individual.
I'll go back to our archives and sort of see what the language looks like from years ago that we used to use and incorporate some of the feedback that was mentioned here tonight.
Mhm.
And then we'll send out certified letters to the people who fall within who have met the threshold outlined in the bylaws.
Mhm.
It's like Reshma Patel request the floor.
Reshma, and then we'll just move on with the agenda. Reshma, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to get an idea of timing because I think the borough president is reviewing right now, right, new applicants for the board. So wouldn't, like, how many people we have resigned then would potentially increase the number of new members?
Yeah, so I mean, that's part of this calculation as well, is that right now is a review of many different applicants for the board. So, I mean, the timing was also the fact that we just passed the new bylaws the other month, or last month, yeah, sorry, time, but last month. And so, you know, it's also the time where applications are coming in and they're still going through the reviews. So, you know, this is also where we can have a lot of the needs of our board met as well through appointments.
I
So-
just wanted to make sure that's going to happen pretty quickly, right? Because I don't know what the borough president timeframe is. But
Yeah, and I mean, I'm also not basing this process on the borough presidents because people get appointed to fill vacancies at any time of the year. So like, that's not so important, but I think, you know, it just is a good time when there are a lot of people who are very, you know, engaged and eager to join a board, that it's just how the dominoes fall.
One thing we can do is we can provide CC'd copies of these letters to the borough president's office. It's probably good for them to know anyway. You know, if they choose to just, some of these people are up for reappointment now, others have another year to go. If the borough president's office chooses just not to reappoint these people themselves, well, then it seems like that matter is dealt with that way. But if the committee is amenable, we can provide them with a copy of these letters that go out to the members.
Mhm. All right, John, and then I'm gonna end the debate.
I'll be very quick. Yeah, I would agree with that. Also, if someone is nominated by a council member or another person, copy them as well. And you know, I think that's a very good idea.
Mhm.
And just as a point of information, I was in a meeting yesterday where the borough president's office announced that they were going to send out the decisions on reappointments and appointments at the end of the first week of May, by the end of the first week. Point of information.
Mhm. Okay. All right, so Jesus waived his report, so we'll now go to the committee agendas. So we'll start off with transportation. Brian?
Before we do that, let the record show Sandy and Sandro are now here. They weren't during the roll call, so we've marked them present.
Great. Okay, and Brian, go ahead.
Okay, so the first thing that we have on the agenda, which is unclear if it actually is going to happen as presented, but I'm going to encourage it as strongly as possible, is that NYU Langone wants to meet with me, not the committee, but me personally, to talk about a future request to have a temporary PET scanner on the southeast corner of 38th Street and First Avenue. This is kind of going to be the medical scanner in a trailer setup that they have had in the past. The last time we had it around, it was somewhat contentious, but not really a district-wide issue and not necessarily a gigantic disruption for the neighbors, but something that was a little bit of a blocker on the block that they put it on because it had to become a one-way block instead of a two-way block. I was on the committee when we discussed this, and I don't know if there was like ear-splitting noise or anything like that, or generator stuff. It was only operated during the day from what I recall. I do remember that there were some people who were residents of that area of 38th and First who had come to the meetings and hadn't been super happy that it kept getting extended, but I'm going to try to find out why NYU needs it, how long they plan to have it, if there's anything we can do in terms of accountability. There's going to be a meeting about this on Friday that the vice chair of my committee will attend. And then we're going to find out more then. But I'm going to encourage them very strongly to come to our next transportation committee meeting with what they're looking to do. If they're not going to be ready, then that's going to come off the agenda. I'll let you guys know at that time. The only other thing that I am seeing on my committee work plan template that has not been fully addressed at this point is that we had a prior discussion about summer streets. So I would slip this in at number 2 is committee discussion on summer streets. And this will attempt to pull to have a follow-up on past discussions where we wanted it extended in our district, and we had many ideas for DOT in terms of how it could be extended and how it could be given more reach to different streets in our district. DOT has not been very responsible with us on that, responsive with us on that in the past. So expectations are low, but we would reinforce anything that we've passed previously if the committee is up for that. And while I am here, there's been some ongoing discussions about reviving the FDR Forum plan. The good news is that there may be some resources in which to invest in that so that we can calendar it again. The not so good news is that there's a lot of ideas going around, and the ideas are here, but the actual execution is not there. And I don't want to cut off anybody's ideas, but the original concept for this was to kind of have a little bit of programming for the district, to have some prearranged stuff where we could present it and then have public interactions. We could take questions and we could have people ask things and make their own suggestions. We didn't want to have something where it was purely totally unstructured and just an open mic for everybody to come in and say whatever they wanted to say. We did want to kind of have some programming during it. Up until this point, we've had zero budget for programming, and we also don't have any administrative or event planning help with it at all. And so I'm willing to take on both of those things and try to help either the office or this committee arrange that ASAP if we want to use this year's budget money to do it. I don't know how much this sort of stuff costs. We can call around to get some quotes. If it's just a rendering, I would say maybe we could get a rendering done for a modest amount of money and try to get something where we have something drawn from 14th to 59th Street that depicts alternate uses of the FDR Drive right of way, which after reviewing the situation, we cannot cut off the transit access from the express buses, so there will at least need to be some vehicles coming into the district from the south regardless. How much of the right of way we want to convert over from car usage to not car usage is somewhat optional. And there's plenty of room on the ground and on the viaduct to both have, a boulevard access for cars, or to have parks or alternate transportation or whatever we want to have. One thing that's been proposed by certain other community groups is that there should be some sort of light rail line that connects 42nd Street with the Lower East Side. We've never discussed anything like that before, but it does remain something that's a transit possibility in this situation. But there would have to be a lot of details on that sort of thing ironed out.
And Brian, we can restart our calls to kind of think this through and figure out the best approach. So
I thought I'd put that out there. in terms of like, again, one of the issues is that I've had, in the sense of saying, did I need help with the forum programming for this? I've had the suggestion put before me that we turned it into something totally different. And unless that sort of totally different kind of thing gets turned around very quickly without my direct involvement, it's not something that's actually helping advance it. It's helping setting it back.
Mhm. All right, thank you, Brian. And yeah, we'll discuss offline. That doesn't need to be an agenda item, but we'll figure out a game plan.
Yeah, I have not put that on the committee's agenda because I'm not requesting their volunteering for help to get personally involved in it at this point, nor am I asking them to make any decisions or resolutions about how we should move forward on it. But if we need that, we will put it on the agenda. We'll figure that out.
Sounds good. And then just the last thing, which actually also addresses a question that Sandy's had for quite some time, as well as business affairs, is about the open streets, the dining issues. So the community board chairs, I was checking in with the rest of them if they had heard anything about it, and many of them have not. So this is going to be a topic of discussion for all of us at tomorrow's borough board meeting, because some people have felt that DOT has not answered their questions or not sufficiently answered their questions. So hopefully we get some information about that tomorrow, about what's going on with transportation and these open streets. So
yeah, my understanding, you're talking about open restaurants or open streets?
Yes, sorry, open restaurants.
Yeah, again, we let the BASA committee take the lead on that. But to my knowledge, in terms of reading about the news, the only public information I've heard about that is that all proposals are stuck exactly where they were last discussed in the news, and that there are some legal issues that they're trying to work through in terms of lawsuits brought against the city, that they're dealing with that ahead of everything else, which means that it's just only getting delayed further and further and further in the council.
Yep. Okay. Thank you, Brian. Oh, Sandy, go ahead.
And just what I have heard is that the council's not willing to take it up. That if we do want it to move forward, it's got to be through the council. And part of the concern is that some people don't want the DOT to take over the program.
Right.
To be the kind of bottom line concern. But as we've said, it means it's in limbo, and so we've got kind of a mess until it gets sorted. Anyway, thank you.
No, appreciate it, Sandy. Let's move on to Environment and Parks. Neil, go ahead. What do you have up next month?
Okay, good evening, Kyle. We will have, I'll say, a general discussion of post-pandemic challenges for the parks in our district. We've had a chance to go and visit a couple different parks, and with speaking to individuals who work on those parks and take care of the parks, there appeared to be a lot of challenges, rat extermination, the increase of individuals using the parks during the pandemic and now post-pandemic, with more people using it, that's more stress on the parks, trash cleanup, some people have said safety issues. And so I wanted to speak to the committee to also hear what's their view, what are they seeing? Because we go and we speak to people who are taking care of the parks, but just as individuals, what are they seeing? And I think just a general conversation. I just wanted to hear what people think. What do they think of the parks post-pandemic?
Yeah, no, I think that's great, Neil. And I think he's done such a great job of encapsulating the connection within the district as a whole, for all of the green space and the parks and how they're connected. So I think that'll be a really good discussion to see how things have developed since then, and looking at it holistically rather than just at one single park or one area of the district. So I think this is a good, vibrant discussion. Okay.
Yeah, should be good.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. So we'll move on to budget and governmental affairs. Reshma? I think your volume is off, Reshma. Commissioner still on? I think she might have dropped off. All right, well, we'll come back to her. So we'll move to Health and Human Services. Elvie?
Hi, good afternoon. So we have an agenda on, we will be discussing on making an automated external defibrillators available at subway stations. So we will see if we can draft a resolution on that. And the second agenda that we have is just to discuss about the Community Board 6 Health Fair, which up to this time, we have not identify any site. So most probably at the end of the month, if we could not find any site, we might have to push this Community Board 6 Health Fair in the fall.
Okay. Yeah, I know spaces are a little bit weird still and everything, but let's keep looking. And I don't know if Elvie on the committee, if anyone was able to suggest any alternative spaces that might be useful, but we'll keep crowd sourcing. Yeah.
Do we also have to include, we have already the final draft of the EpiPen resolution and it passed the committee. And we are planning to have it present to the full board meeting in May. So do we have to put that in the agenda or?
No. You're all good. Yeah, that'll just be on the full board agenda
Okay.
since it's passed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Let's move to housing and homelessness.
Yes, so as usual, I'm in the weeds because we just had a meeting 2 days ago, but we, I think we had a reasonably productive meeting given that DHS didn't show. We had a lot of members of the public there. I gave a simple presentation, an optimistic presentation about the new family shelter. We got a lot of questions in the chat, which Jesus captured. So that we can, when we eventually get a call in the books, we can take some of those in. I'm hoping that we do, in fact, get Midway Living and DHS next month. I actually think Midway Living will run a good shelter. That their family shelters are what they do. So, they have experience. We did a bunch of old business too. One of the things was, we're trying to keep an eye on the budget negotiations, which because there's so much housing stuff bound up in it. As of this morning, as of Monday, it was looking good for the housing compact. As of this morning, it was looking less good. I don't know where it is now, but hopefully we'll know in a couple of days. The other thing that we raised is the unhoused students in our schools from the census information that John shared with me. John, I think our committee wants to talk to yours about whether there's some collaborative resolution that we need to do for to ensure either funding, resources, or support for those students. So you can talk about that when you come up. I'm assuming John is here. I can't see the faces.
Yeah, I didn't want to take up time, but yeah, I will. It was on my report actually. Thanks.
Okay. So that's the important stuff that I think needs reporting. I will say we have good attendance. We've been very lucky. Everyone seems reasonably engaged. So that's good. As for next month, because I'm in the weeds, I don't know what else is going to need to go on the agenda. But I would like Sandy's going to go in a few minutes, and I'd like to find out whether she thinks we need to do another joint meeting based on what's happening with either the casino or something else. Because we've had people in our committee say, look, we really want to put forward an aggressive proposal for housing on that site. And I know that, we can't just make a proposal while things are in flux. But, I think our committee is particularly annoyed about the casino.
Yeah, listen, I don't think there's anything wrong with being aggressive with a proposal. It is a proposal, right?
Yeah.
So let's dare to dream, right? If we want
Yeah.
to say how that site can be used for housing, like let's assume that we have the ability to do so and come up with a proposal in that way.
Well,
Just
is it appropriate to have an agenda item like
well, I wouldn't put it like specific to that site, but I would just say, something effective like, affordable housing proposals in District 6, something like that.
Okay, I'm willing to structure a agenda item around that. If Jesus, if you're willing to put that on. And that's all I have.
Awesome. Thank you, Rich.
Affordable housing proposals in Manhattan Community District 6. Do we want to
Yeah,
make it a little bit more specific so that people don't think, oh, there's all these affordable housing opportunities in District 6 and they come to this meeting like it's something we don't want to clickbait them.
Do we want to say discussion of potential affordable housing sites?
Yeah, that's better, I think. Because it doesn't sound like we're reviewing proposals that have been submitted by someone else. So
Much better. Yeah, we don't want to be clickbaity.
Yeah.
All right, that's it for me.
All right, thank you, Rich. We'll move to public safety.
All right, so we have our meeting tomorrow night where we'll be discussing the Borough President's scaffolding plan, among other proposals. So looking ahead to May, what we have right now is trying again to get FDNY to present on the lithium-ion battery safety concerns. I know Steve and a few others have been asking for some insight from FDNY, so they weren't available for tomorrow's meeting, but we're trying again for May. It's purely informational at this point. I know there's all the legislation is being pushed through the council faster than we can actually keep up with it. The other item that we want to tackle here came up at full board last week as far as discovery reform. I know it's part of the budget negotiations, but it's really just, I think this is one item where everybody in the district knows about bail reform, but I don't think a lot of people are familiar with discovery reform and what's happening and what the changes mean and the amount of resources that are required to actually accomplish that. So multiple sides to that issue. And that is all I have for right now, unless there's any questions.
Not seeing any. I'm interested to see what comes out of that discovery reform conversation. I'm interested about that.
Yeah, I think I may forward some suggested presenters, but I still have to research that. See if we can get some experts.
Sounds good. All right, thank you. We'll move to Sandy, Land Use and Waterfront.
Steve had his hand up. I don't know, Steve, did you get?
Sorry, Steve, was your hand up?
Yeah, just a small note to the FDNY lithium ion presentation, even though it's informative and bills are being passed, it's good to be educated because New York City has several schools and research in battery technology. So I want to make sure that we're aware that anything that is drafted, we are aware of the language that there are bad actors, but at the same time, there are legitimate institutions that are researching, developing battery technology that obviously wouldn't be tested by organizations like Underwriters Laboratories. So I just wanted to inform that it's not only the purpose of the information is to make sure that we are aware of anything that we draft. It takes into consideration for other institutions for legitimate reasons like research and development.
Good point. Thank you, Steve.
So our May meeting has it's been a little bit in flux. We were to have a presentation on the waterfront agency in April, and they asked to be moved to May because apparently some of the items that may be incorporated into the waterfront agency are going to be incorporated into the mayor's announcements at Earth Day this year. So they wanted to confirm exactly what's happening before they came to us. So, and I think we went through a couple of things with Brendan about this, but so yes, we've got the BP on housing. We've also got the BP on waterfront agency. And we'll also have a presentation by the planning fellow who is preparing. She apparently, and Majed has been speaking with her. Apparently she's got a report, but it's not quite ready for publication or presentation to our group. And then I really wanted to discuss the bill that Assemblymember Epstein had prepared for the ADUs, but it's not going to be brought up in this session. So it sounds like we can wait till the fall to deal with that more. It is something that was briefly discussed in the budget committee. And now it sounds like we're going to be having monthly presentations by Soloviev about the site. So that will be, I don't know, Rich, if that then is maybe a place to bring your proposals, or somehow we could segue into that at their presentation.
Yeah.
And the other thing I forwarded the sites that we found at our last meeting to the Borough President's office. We identified 2 additional sites that could be potential for developing housing, and they said they didn't have them on their list, so they will incorporate those. So that's also hopefully something when they come to us again, we'll be able to talk about more.
Okay. Sounds good.
And I guess I'm not sure, Kyle, if you announced that Soloviev is presenting at our meeting this month on Monday.
Yeah, so they will be attending on Monday's meeting, the April meeting, and the online agenda reflects this as well, just to introduce basically their government relations team for the project. Sandy, Majed, myself, and the board office spoke with them yesterday to talk about updates to their proposal. One of the things that we asked of them was to introduce themselves, but also to get more information about their planning and design and things of that nature. So as those updates come in, they won't necessarily be at every single meeting because they won't necessarily have updates for every single meeting. But when they have big updates, we're going to want them to come and share whatever those updates are, as we are a stakeholder in the community. So they'll be coming and letting us know. So they will have a brief introduction at Monday's land use meeting, and we'll take it from there.
It did sound like they would have a fuller, more developed presentation for May, maybe not. And we could always, it would actually suit us better if they came in June, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Thank you very much, Sandy. We'll move to John.
Actually, I have some questions. So Sandy, you mentioned a lot of things, but none of which are actually on any of the.
Well,
so is this May agenda, as far as we know what's confirmed, is this okay?
Well, we've been discussing with the Borough President, the waterfront agency. They will present that. And we will have a presentation by the planning fellow.
Okay. I'm sorry, I must have missed all that. I'll look at my emails again and I'll speak with Brendan tomorrow.
It's been in flux. We're trying to, sort of pull it all together. The Borough President has been modifying things.
Okay. I'll play with that language and
right.
All right.
Okay. Thank you, Sandy. Moving on to John, Youth and Education.
And anticipating Jesus's question at the end of this, the proper description would be agenda information for the May meeting of Youth and Education. Let me give a brief report on the things that we have on the table. We have 5 issues moving. The first I reported on at the full board meeting related to cannabis legislation, which is still under discussion in Albany. But we had a wonderful presentation from the Office of Cannabis Management at our last meeting. And we're just waiting to see where the three persons in a room come down on a lot of these issues. And we've been advised that the board, as well as the city council, is sitting on the side until that happens. So to be continued, if we have no movement, we will have a resolution asking why there hasn't been movement. If there is movement, we will have a resolution, hopefully supporting that, but this is all in formation. The second issue that we're looking at is was already mentioned by Rich, is the sanctuary city asylum students in our schools. We have PS 116 and Baruch particularly have high levels of these kids. We want to be sure that they're getting the right services, particularly language services, and we want to understand the impact on the community. So we're going to be moving ahead on that, and we have data on that, and we're reaching out to the Community Education Council on that. The third issue we're looking at is a work in progress, and it relates to a very creative idea about siting schools jointly with commercial and/or residential housing. But this is truly premature at this point. For us, on the Education Committee, we're going to reach out to the School Construction Authority before we try to hold a joint meeting with Sandy's committee, simply because we need to get the lay of the land from the DOE's perspective. But in a resource-constrained environment with a declining number of students, an extremely creative and innovative idea would be to figure out how to find alternative ways of siting schools. And it worked very well with PS 59 and the High School of Art and Design, which now shares a site with on a 99-year lease from a developer who was bought land from the city and put up a co-op, affordable housing, and a Whole Foods all on the same site. So this is an idea whose time might be coming. So we're going to see where the DOE stands on that. The next issue is our continuing collaboration with Neil and Parks on Stuyvesant Square Park and its effect on schools. We've already discussed that. And then a fifth issue is there are 30,000 vacant pre-K seats across New York right now, and we're trying to understand how they affect the schools in CB6. So we will have some flavor on that across those multiple committees, but we'll have that ready for you basis once we have some conversations. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, John. Don't see any questions. So we'll just move on to business affairs. I don't see Claire or Anton here. I think we have Reshma back. Reshma, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
All right. Do you want to quickly go through your agenda or mention anything?
Sure. We again just now getting into the budget part of the budget and governmental affairs and started looking at budget requests. So people will be getting emails from me. Again, so if you have any updates before our meeting, that'd be great because we're going to be discussing a budget request. So we don't have a big backlog when in the fall when we are putting everything together. And then we're also going to go back to, and Sandy mentioned this, the basement bill, Assembly Bill 1075 that we discussed at our March meeting didn't move forward in the state assembly. So we are going to revisit that because we had kind of put it on hold, our conversation about whether or not we wanted to support that bill by Assemblymember Epstein. And then the other bill that land use had brought up, which was a similar bill on the change of code for dwelling units that had been in the assembly in 2022 and not in 2023. And then lastly, this is a suggestion by another committee member to take a look at what other community boards are doing in terms of governmental affairs, whether or not if they have a committee, if they do, what kind of issues they're discussing. So that way we would have more meaningful discussion in our committee. So we're gonna discuss that.
Okay, thank you very much, Rishma. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. And actually, before we conclude, I glossed over Adam's report as treasurer. So Adam, I don't know if you want to give a quick report.
Sure, I'll give a brief update. So we had a chance to talk with Jesus. Yesterday, he informed us at the beginning of the week that we are basically running a slight surplus for this fiscal year, which concludes at the end of June. And so we're looking at potentially anywhere of potentially, I think, a little less than $50,000, which can be spent on certain things. Obviously, there are restrictions that come along with this. But, you know, as Brian had alluded to earlier, you know, spending something on a study or something like that might be, you know, worthy of consideration. So obviously, it will take time. And we don't have a lot of that right now. So if there are anything that we want to potentially move on, reach out to Kyle and take it from there. So just in terms of just general expenditures as a whole, Jesus also informed us that there will be a slight increase for salaries due to a union negotiation. So expect those expenses to go up slightly. We'll be waiting to see when we'll get more guidance from DCAS. But yeah, so that's the bulk of my report. But outside of that, you know, everything seems to be going well with the budget. Thank you.
That's great, Adam. Sandy, you have a question?
I did. Are there restrictions on how we spend the money? I mean, sometimes if it's over a certain amount, you need 3 consultants to give proposals, or is there that type of thing that you're aware of?
Do you want me to answer, or Jesus, do you want to take that?
Jesus or Adam, yeah.
You can answer it if you want, or if you not, or if you don't, I can answer.
Jesus is the expert, so I'll defer him. But I did ask him this yesterday, so I don't know. If
so there are some restrictions. The main restriction that, given the amounts that we deal with, that we need to be aware of is the $20,000 restriction. If it's $20,000 or less, that makes spending the money a lot easier, and we can spend it on almost anything except, you know, things that clearly don't benefit the board. You know, I'm thinking of the Brooklyn CB1 buying a car, you know, I'm thinking of things like that. So, you know, studies or equipment or things like that is fine. Above $20,000, you do have to start putting it out for bid. This whole 3 bidder thing is not actually a thing for the city. They have a much more convoluted way of doing it, but in the past, we have used 3 bidders, the 3 bid approach when we didn't have to, just because that's what the committee members involved chose to do. But once you get above $20,000, it adds several months to the process, and it can be many more than 3, or if you don't end up with many bids at all, it could be just 1. So, but the whole requirement for 3 bidders is not actually a thing for the city procurement process.
Okay, thank you.
Sounds good. John, go ahead.
Just a quick question. You get a flavor around how this money could be spent. But for example, just thinking of what I said a moment ago, if we discover that, you know, there's a need at PS 116 or middle school for backpacks for asylum seeker kids or things of that nature, which would be well under 20,000 and would directly benefit kids and schools in the district, is that an appropriate subject?
That is not something that this board has ever really purchased. That is not something, I mean, that would be a question for the treasurers and exec, but the board has never really bought things necessarily for philanthropic reasons, to give them away, to give scholarships, to throw block parties. You know, those are some ideas that I've heard, but that is not really something we have ever done.
Yeah, I'll throw it to me as assistant treasurer, but then I don't want to like jump into like, you know, like ideas.
Yeah, I didn't mean to take us off. But...
Yeah, but if you have any ideas, just email me about it. Because Adam, B, myself, and Jesus we're going through all of these ideas now.
My concern with that is that the comptroller's office, when you buy things with city money, they expect that you're going to use them or you're going to retain them in your office.
Yeah.
So if we're buying a bunch of backpacks and then giving them away, if they come by and we're like, show us all these backpacks you bought. We can't. That's going to be an issue when it comes to inventory.
Never underestimate bureaucracy. I got it. Thank you.
B, go ahead.
Yeah, so I wanted to echo what Jesus has said, because we've had this debate over the years in the executive committee. And the only place, so the actual budget money that Adam spoke about really can't go to the way you suggested, John. It has to be spent really at the community. However, we do have our affairs, the various money that we have kept from the special money from having these various events that we've raised money on. There is a resolution from the executive committee that I think, Jesus, you could probably find, which says if there's anything that is significant for the community, we can look at doing it, but that's the street fair money. So again, that's a different resolution and a different pot of money.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, B. And then finally, Rich.
Mine's on another topic. So should I go anyway?
Let me transition to older new business and then you can bring it up. Okay, so we'll end that debate. So we're now at older new business. So if any committee member has any older new business, please raise your hand. And yes, Rich.
I just wanted to ask John, what term is used inside DOE and the schools community to refer to the students who are here as part of the migrant population?
Right now, it's sanctuary city asylum seekers.
And
that's the way. That's what I've seen in writing so far.
Great.
But I will clarify that further for you. But that's what I've seen.
Okay.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll go to Sandy.
And this may be a totally random question. Do we have a parliamentarian?
No, we don't have a parliamentarian right now.
We have a lot of people who think they're parliamentarian. Does that count?
and that is, yeah, we had this in-depth discussion during the bylaws committee in March. So
because I think in the bylaws it says we have one, right? Or that we're supposed to.
We can have one, yeah. So the chair can appoint someone. So yeah, but we've been doing it by committee essentially. Yeah.
Yes, I just wanted to raise two things as new business. It's really old business from the bylaws committee. So at the last session that we had, there were two items that came up for discussion that I said I would bring to the executive committee because the executive committee can modify specific sections of the bylaws. We've had the past practice. And one was the question that was raised at our last meeting when we were going over the document of whether or not we should eliminate term limits for any of the offices. And certainly that was not something that we had debated for the bylaws because we have followed pretty much the term limits that you see in city council and government. And actually there's positive in having term limits and bringing in new blood. The second thing was there was a lot of questions about our voting process. And are we following parliamentary procedure for voting and what should it be? And we got caught up in language and looking at all of that. So Carl, I would like to maybe put this on for our next exec, have people think about it. And then I think probably the term limit one we can move off quicker and then maybe write out what we think the process should be for voting.
Okay. Thank you for your recommendations, B. We can add that to next month's agenda. So if anybody's hands are raised for a particular feeling on one of those recommendations, please save it for next month when we'll discuss it more in depth. Okay. Thank you, B. Is that it?
That's it from me.
Okay, so I'll add that to the agenda for next month's exec. And Brian.
I do have a question for B before we have next month's exec and discuss anything of the sort, but not the things that you mentioned, but particularly the, had it been discussed with the 3-day resolution requirement, had it been discussed about Wednesday night full board meetings and whether there was a possibility, whether it was okay as long as something was in not maybe 2 days in advance or something like that, but if there was an exception for that, if the third day was going to fall on the weekend or something like that.
So I think, Brian, we wanted to be flexible. The whole idea of using 3 days was to make sure we got it ahead of time. But we do know issues come up and resolutions come up, what we wanted to really deal with, and this was felt by a lot of the public, a lot of the board members that actually were listening to the bylaws, that we shouldn't, unless it's a real emergency, just pop a resolution the day of the board meeting. So I would say, if given the situation, there's flexibility, Brian, but it shouldn't be a standard practice.
Is the bylaws, do you think the bylaw language includes that flexibility that we would?
It says time sensitive, unless it's time sensitive, there's an exclusion.
Okay. What about the fact that full board meetings are on Wednesdays? Everything has to be sent out the prior Friday. Was that something that was intended in terms of the flexibility?
Well, I think we had followed the existing process. We allow stuff that we get on Friday, but we really didn't go into the fact, Brian, that the board meeting is on Wednesday.
Okay. All right, I'm good.
Okay. Seeing no further old or new business, the meeting is adjourned at 7:42 p.m.